Okay, this is the video on how to maintain your starter. Um, the starter I've had in the fridge, and it has kind of like a nail polish type smell to it, like I don't know, just kind of a weird acetone type smell. So it's hungry. That's an indication that it's hungry and it needs to be fed. And really all that means is just you're going to put some water and you're going to put some flour in it, so it has a bit of fuel to continually feed itself and not die the starter. So this is my starter. You can look at it and see that it's pretty flat, not a lot of air in it, pretty flat. So, and it's got that smell. So usually you need to feed your starter probably once a week. If you're not baking. So if you're baking once a week, which I typically do bake a couple loaves of bread each week, so I tend to not need to feed my starter, because when you bake a loaf, or when you're preparing your starter in order to bake, you're feeding it. You're adding a bunch of flour and water to it, and it's being fed. So that'll usually keep it going for at least until your next, at least for a week until your next baking session. But if you're not going to bake for a week or so or longer, you need to feed it. So the steps are pretty much the same as when you are getting your starter prepped for when you cook your bread. So I have a little bit in here. It's not a ton, but I'm gonna do about 100 grams of water and then 100 grams of flour just to feed it. You don't want to do too much, because then it's just gonna be wasted. Because if you keep feeding it and not baking, you're just going to develop a ton of starter that you're not going to really use. So just do a little bit. Usually they say like double the volume. Like if this is 200 grams, you'd add 200 grams of water and flour. So 100 grams of water, 100 grams of flour, and that way you have enough fuel for the remaining starter to feed off of. So I think I probably have around 100 grams here, 150 grams. So I'm gonna do a 200 grams of flour and water combo. So 100 grams of flour, 100 grams of water. So water's first, and we just tarred out the scale. Gonna add 100 grams of water. And that's 100 grams of water. Gonna mix it up. Again, same procedure as when you're doing the starter in preparation for baking bread. So nothing new. Just create a slurry, get it all mixed up. Does not need to be perfect. Just get it kind of assimilated with the old starter there, the flour, or the water rather. And then we're just gonna add 100 grams of water, or 100 grams of flour rather, to our water mixture. There we go. So that's it. Gonna mix it again. This again is gonna, when it's mixed, it should resemble peanut butter, kind of smooth peanut butter-ish, just thick. Get it all mixed up, get all the dry flour hydrated with the water and the old starter. Try to get the sides. And that's pretty much it. So that is how you feed starter. So normally so if you're baking bread, you would feed it and then you would put it on the counter and have it rise, have it get fermented. So you're not gonna do that. You're gonna because you're just feeding it to keep it maintained. So you're gonna put the lid on and you're just gonna throw it right back in the fridge. And then again, it's gonna be about a week or so, depending upon how much, volume of starter you have and how much you added flour water mixture to it, how much fuel it has to feed off of. But typically it's about a week. and then you need to refeed it. So, and you can see if you're doubling volume, it can get, I mean, you can start to have a decent amount of starter that you're not going to use. So what people tend to do is they will, like say if I'm not going to bake for a couple weeks and I just need to feed it to maintain it, I'm gonna have a lot left over. So I'm going to maybe take some of this, maybe half of it, and just, you could make pancakes out of it. You can make stuff with it, and there's recipes online. But you just don't want to keep doubling it. You want to probably take some starter away, and then feed the remaining starter that you have left. That way you're not exponentially increasing the amount of starter that you have, and then it's just going to be a wasted amount of flour. So, but that's it, and I cap it and put it directly in the fridge, and that's all there is to it. So that's the method for feeding your starter. So flour and water mixture, equal parts, and then just throw it right back in the fridge. Don't put it on the counter.